Okay, so yesterday we learned all about, we sort of concluded the whole discussion of the law of a person who's davening Shemona Esrei. Anyone else should not sit down nearby, because either they are implying that they do not care to accept the yoke of heaven, or that they are being disrespectful to the Shechina and to the ground that they're on became holy, because when they daven, they're in front of the Shechina, and so they're being disrespectful to the Shechina. So basically, we learned this from Eli, and we discussed in depth all the different situations and understandings of when it might be permissible or it is permissible, and how we learn them from Eli, and was Eli really obligated to get up for her? Wasn't he busy learning Torah? And is that a proof that learning Torah isn't good enough? And there is such a view that learning Torah is not good enough. Or another understanding is, no, he was learning Torah, but he wasn't saying words of Torah. So reciting words of Torah is a good enough excuse, but thinking words of Torah is not, because you can't tell if the person is involved in being respectful to Hashem, or if they're accepting the yoke of heaven or not. He also said that when it comes to even the concept of accepting the yoke of heaven, it's a little vague, because we know Kriya Shema is considered accepting the yoke of heaven. That's the essence, that's the epitome of acceptance of the yoke of heaven. Kabbalas Oil Malchus Shamayim is Shema. And this law we're talking about is, the person is saying Shemona Esrei, and so we're saying that during the Shemona Esrei, he's accepting the yoke of heaven, and you are not if you're hanging around there and you're sitting down. So what we're not discussing a person saying Shema and you aren't accepting the yoke of heaven next to someone who's saying the Shema. We're talking about someone who's saying Shemona Esrei. Now, Shemona Esrei is not known as the main place of acceptance of the yoke of heaven. So now we're jumping to the concept of Torah study. Is Torah study considered acceptance of the yoke of heaven? And that itself is an argument among the rabbis. The Torah writes that Torah study is not the acceptance of the yoke of heaven, while the Beis Yosef says that it is the acceptance. It is considered part of the acceptance of the yoke of heaven, and obviously it's not the main acceptance of the yoke of heaven, Torah study, but it has some element of acceptance of the yoke of heaven, and so basically there's an argument about it. And based on what we learned from the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, the Shulchan Aruch Harav, it implied like it depends on what it looks like. Does it look like you're accepting the yoke of heaven? In other words, because the law of Torah study was, does it look like you're studying Torah? So in any event, that was one area where we're trying to see how the proof from the story of Eli is applicable. How we adapt it to our daily life, to the halacha, how we learn from that story the halachas of when a person needs to stand. And now the other issue that we dealt with yesterday was the fact that Eli was sitting at the time, and she came in there to daven. Now, why was Eli obligated to stand up if she came in there and she came in there and started davening, and his Dalet Amos and his 4 cubits within, she went and started davening. It's really more of her fault than his fault. And so we said there's 2 ways of understanding why he stood up. Number one is that he stood up even though she came afterwards, because it's a place meant for davening. Because it's a place meant for davening, therefore, Eli would be obligated. She has all right to go and daven wherever she wants over there. And Eli would be obligated to stand if someone's within, even though he's sitting already, because it's a place meant for davening. And another reason why he was obligated to stand up, the fact that Eli, well, not that he's obligated to stand up, but there is it says, I forget the term that the Alter Rebbe said, but he said something along the lines of a chassid, a person who's pious. It would be a midas chasidus. That was his term. A midas chasidus. It would be an act of piety to stand up because you don't want the other person to be at fault. So you're saving the other person from being at fault. That would be a midas chasidus, and that's what Eli did. Eli stood up because it's not appropriate for someone to be sitting, but it's not your fault, so you really don't have to stand up. But it's a midas chasidus that you stand up, so the other person wouldn't be at fault for standing in your Dalet Amos and saying Shemona Esrei and causing it to look like that you're being disrespectful. They're causing a view of disrespect to the Shekhinah because they're the ones who are davening in your Dalet Amos. They could daven anywhere, and they chose to stand right while now. What that means is that for you to go somewhere and sit down right in front of someone who's davening Shemona Esrei, that's the real prohibition. But to be seated and then someone comes and says Shemona Esrei, that's a midas chasidus. That would be an act of piety. If you want to do something extra, then that would be appropriate for you to stand up, even though you were sitting beforehand. Yes, Susan.
How do I know if somebody is saying the Shemona Esrei if I can't hear them? If I walk into the temple, maybe right. I just don't go sit down near somebody that looks like they're praying, no matter what.
Right. Well, yeah. Listen, generally the way you tell is if their feet are together. When a person says Shemona Esrei, they're in a very specific. There's a specific way a person stands. Okay. And from that way they stand, you can tell.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Now, I don't see everyone's hand if they go up, so you might have to just interrupt me if you have a question, because I'm using my phone and I'm not using my computer. So if you have a question, and you just feel free to just interrupt, okay? And so now we're going to do the next piece of Gemara, and we started it yesterday, but we didn't get too far. So we were talking about the law of Meire Halacha Lefnei Rabbi, giving a verdict in front of one's teacher. And what that means is that it's not respectful to render a verdict in Jewish law when your teacher is nearby, is not far. And what we're going to be dealing with is the fact that Shmuel, the simple understanding of our Gemara is that at the age of 2, he came and made like a scene at the Mishkan and gave a verdict that was not, was different than what his Rebbe, what Eli the Kohen Gadol, had taught the people there. And yesterday we discussed the fact that Eli is not exactly Shmuel's Rebbe yet. He's going to become his Rebbe. But Eli, at this point, Shmuel has just met him. So how can we call him his Rebbe, his teacher, his main teacher?
I have a question, Rabbi.
Yeah, sure.
I want to know, would Shmuel know that that's against the teachings of his Rebbe if he was 2 years old and didn't learn anything from him yet?
So let's see the story, and then we'll
okay.
We'll rethink your question. Okay. Yeah, let's see if it answers it or not. But we'll revisit your question. So what we mentioned yesterday was that Taisvis over here asked this question that he didn't learn from him yet. Why are we calling him his Rebbe? And we said that Tosfos answers, he says two things, and it's questionable if Tosfos means that you need both of these things, or is it either of these things? But what Tosfos says is these two things. One is that Eli was the Gadol Hadar, he was the leader of the generation, the greatest scholar of the generation, and he came to him to study from him. So what we mentioned yesterday, that there's an argument among the later commentaries if this is really, you need to have both or just one. In other words, the point would be the case. The simple case would be a difference between these two ways of looking at it is if a person went to see one of the greatest scholars of the generation. So let's say they went to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, or they went to Reb Moshe Feinstein, who was probably, considered one of the greatest scholars in America, and who gave halachic verdict. Or in Israel, maybe today it's Reb Zalman Nehemiah Goldberg, who's the greatest posek. So the person went to them and gave a halachic rendering in front of their Rebbe, or he's not their Rebbe because they never learned from him, but they gave a halachic rendering there. Would that be transgressing this law? Because you're not coming there to learn from them. You're coming there to give them honor. You're coming to see them, to visit them, but you're not really coming to learn. Here in our story, in our Gemara, Shmuel is actually coming to learn from Eli. But what would be in a case if he didn't come to learn from him? He went and just saw him, went to get a blessing from him, but not really to learn and study by him. Would that also be considered Moira Halacha B'fnei Rabbah? Because the fact that this person is the greatest scholar of the generation, or one of the greatest scholars of the generation, does that make him considered Rabbah, your Rebbe? Or does it also need to have that you're coming there to learn from him and to study by him, and that you're going to be accepting him as your main teacher? You're going to be learning. So that's where that would be a case. And I think the Shulchan Aruch, the Shulchan Aruch holds that that's good enough, or the Ramah in the Shulchan Aruch. With some, I believe that is considered Rabbah, your Rebbe, the fact that he is the greatest leader. In other words, following the view that you don't need to have both of these points, even one of them is considered good enough, that he is the Gadol Hadar, that would be good enough to be considered your Rebbe. Now, the Gemara, now we're going to actually see the story. Yes, someone's asking a question?
Yeah.
Yes,
Abraham.
No, it's Ezra.
Making a halakhic statement in front of your Rebbe is extremely serious, as you know, situation. It's what the sons of Aaron did, and they ended up in being killed. So I remember reading about that, how serious it is. You can't just take that kind of risk by making some, halakhic ruling in front of your Rebbe.
Right, correct. It's considered disrespectful, and it's considered that you might be making a mistake because and as well, and it's definitely right. And the Gemara here tells us that it's chayev misa. The person is, as you said, Avraham, that a person would be subject to the death penalty. Now, it doesn't mean that the court would give that death penalty, but it means in the hands of heaven, that they're doing such a act of disrespect that that the heavens would punish this person with that. They would be deserving of the death, being killed by with the death, with heavenly death. Ezra, did you have a question?
Yeah. It's according to what you just quoted for Tosfot, it says that he comes to learn before him. My question is, since he's 2 years old and his mother brought him, doesn't that change the aspect of that one that you said you have to have two things? Some people say you don't have to have two things. even in this situation, the fact that his mother brought him, that he didn't come to learn in front of the Rav, his mother brought him to, doesn't that also play a part here?
I would think that that you're correct in that would play a part. And Tosfos is saying that if the case is that he's coming to learn, that he is planning on learning there, not if his parents drop him off there and he might run away or something, but if he is actually, that it has to be that he's planning on learning there. Most of his he's planning on really studying there and accepting him as his teacher. I would think that would be the meaning of Tosfos. So in those, we're assuming that Shmuel wanted it. So that would be the answer to your question. Yes, that Shmuel, we're assuming that at that age he did want it, even though he sounds very young, but that's what he was planning on doing, was to really absorb, Eli as his, as the, to be able to get the teachings of Eli. That's what he was going there for. But in a scenario where someone was dropped off at some yeshiva, from their parents, and they're really not planning on listening to any of the lectures, and they're just being dropped off because part of the system, the parents doing their job, that in that case, I think you're correct that it would not be considered his rabbi mufak. So good point. Okay, so now we're gonna actually read the Gemara inside. So again, we're on 31b, and we're about 15 lines from the bottom of the page. El hanar hazeh hispalolti, I davened for this nar, for this lad. And that's what Chana tells Eli when she's going to be dropping him off there to study with Eli. She's saying, this is the one I davened for. And so the Gemara understands that to mean that she was sort of praying for him, that I want specifically this child, that this is the most important child. I prayed for this one. Why was she saying that? So the Gemara understands that he must have sinned and he deserves to be punished. And she told Eli, no, this is the child I want, specifically this child, please don't let him get punished. So Amar Rabbi Elazar says, Shmuel, this little child, Shmuel, is Moira Halacha Lefnei Rabbi. He gave a rendering of a halacha before his teacher. And let me read it one more time. Shmuel, Moira Halacha Lefnei Rabbi Haya. He was giving a halachic rendering before his teaching, and therefore he deserved to get punished. Shenamar, that says in the verse, Vayishchatu et hapar, they slaughtered the ox. Vayoviu es hanar, and they brought the lad el Eli to Eli. Now, what does one thing have to do with the other? Slaughtering the ox, which is a sacrifice they were bringing, and then they brought the lad to Eli. Why would it say one thing right after the other? Just because they slaughtered the ox that they needed to bring the lad to Eli? Ella, rather, Amar Lohan Eli told them. Eli said, oh, you're bringing this sacrifice. Chiru kohen, go call a kohen, Lacey Velishchait, let him come and shech. Go get a kohen to come and shech. That's what Eli told them. Now, Eli himself, of course, is a kohen gadol. But I guess he figured, the simple understanding is he wasn't himself gonna shech, and let's go get a kohen, a regular kohen to come and shech. So now Chazinu Shmuel Tahavu Mahadri Basar Kohen. Now Shmuel saw that they're looking and searching for a kohen lemishchat to shech. Amar lahu, Shmuel said, Lama lachol liyahadure basar kohen lemishchat. What are you going to find a kohen to shech? Shchita bazar ksheira. Shchita is kosher, even a person who's not a kohen. which means that there are services in the temple that you need a kohen for, of course. But there are also stuff that you don't need a kohen for. For example, slaughtering. And there are areas in the Beis Hamikdash that even a non-kohen can go. And therefore, the law that Eli said that go get a kohen to shech, and Shmuel saw that they're looking for a kohen, and he says, "What do you need a kohen to shech? Even an Israelite, even a regular Jew, is allowed to slaughter, and shchita b'zar kashera, shchita for by a zar is a stranger, meaning a non-kohen, is also kosher, and therefore you don't need a kohen. And let's just shecht it. Let's just shecht the par this ox."
Rabbi,
Yes.
the
Yes.
footnote, on this part where it says Shmuel was he taught a halach in the presence of his teacher. So the footnote in the Koran Gemara, it says this did not transpire when Shmuel was first brought to the tabernacle, but on one of the festivals after he was already grown. And the source is the Gaonim.
Yeah, I saw that. I think they bring it from the Shita Mekubetzes. I did see that, but that's not the common understanding here. That is one shot. It's definitely not the simple meaning, because if you learn it that way, this verse says Elanar Azes Palalti. The verse is talking about when she came to bring Eli. That's if you look in the verses. I mean, saying if you look in the book of Samuel, the book of Shmuel, you see that the verse is talking about that. But the way that what you just quoted is understanding it to mean like a hint to a story that happens later. So it's not really saying that this is what she said now, but it's more that Elanar Azes Palalti, and it's hinting to us that there's going to be a story later where she begs them to save this child. In other words, it's not the simple reading of it. The simple reading of it is that this is what she's saying now. El Hanar Hazes Palalti. Again, the words El Hanar Hazes Palalti happened when he was 2. The way what you read is that those words are hinting that there's a story that happened later with those words, and the continuation of it, Vayishchatu es apar, and they brought him to Eli, is like hinting to a story that happened later. They did slaughter a par when he came, and they brought him to Eli. But if you read the verses, you see that happened then. But it's hinting to a story that happened. It's hinting to a story that happened later. That's the way that explanation is. Let me just pull it up over here. So I see abroad from the Shita Mekubetzes that it doesn't mean that time the story happened, but it's hinting what happened afterwards when Shmuel got older. But the other commentaries, he brings the Marsha, the Slach, they all follow the simple understanding of the Gemara that it happened then. So we're going to follow that the simple understanding. But thank you for bringing that up. It's always good to hear your insights and other people's insights. So if you find something interesting, feel free to share it. So
Rabbi, can I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
How do we know that Shmuel is only 2 years old when he's brought to have Eli his rabbi? How do we know he's only 2? Where does it say he's only 2 years old?
Because it says after he was weaned, they brought him, and Rashi Rashi says that he was 2 at the time.
Okay,
So the Gemara continues and says that Shmuel had said, what do you need this for? So they brought Shmuel to Eli. Amar lei. So Eli said to Shmuel, Amar lei. So Amar lei. Eli said to Shmuel, he said, Menolacha. Let me find the place. I saw the comment. Amar lei Menolacha. How do you know this? That Eli asked Shmuel, how do you know that even a Israelite is allowed to shech? Amar lei, so he told him, Mi ksiv b'shachat hakoyin. Does it say that the kohen slaughters? It says v'hikrivu hakoyanim. The koyanim have to do the hakrava, the bringing close of the sacrifice, but the shechita is permissible even non-kohen. But the bringing on the altar and the different activities that involve that you need a kohen for. Mikabala ve'elach mitzvah kahuna. From receiving the blood and the further activities, those need a kohen. But mikan, from here you see, l'shchita, that shchita, the slaughtering, shekshera bizarre, even an Israelite can slaughter, even in for sacrifice. In Beis Hamikdash, you don't need to have a kohen for the shchita.
The word
the activities that have to do with receiving the blood from the sacrifice and all those afterwards, that you need a kohen for. Before that, the slaughtering doesn't need a kohen. So Amar lei, so Eli said to Shmuel, Meimar Shaper Ka'amrit. What you said good. Eli, who's the biggest scholar, he told Shmuel, you know what? What you said, you're right. Miu, but Moira halacha b'pnei rabbacha. You are a Moira halacha. You are giving a verdict, a halachic rendering in front of your Rebbe. Whoever does that is subject to the death penalty. So Chana came and she cried before him. I am the woman who stood with you over here to beg God for a child. Amar la shivki li anshe, leave me that I will punish him. Ubeina rachame, and I will ask for mercy. V'yoyev lach rabamine, and Hashem will give you someone greater than this child. He'll give you even a better child. Amra lei, and she said to Eli, no, El Hanar Hazes Halalti, I prayed specifically for this child. And so Eli let go. Now, this is a very powerful story, of course. First of all, number one is, was he really deserving of a death penalty at his age? And was Eli really thinking? It doesn't say clearly that Eli was going to give him the death penalty. He said, let me punish him. And then the fact is, think about this story. Eli, this lady had waited years and years to have children. She never could have a child. All of a sudden, she has a child. And this child seems like either he's going to get the death penalty or he's going to get severely punished. And if Eli says, don't worry, I'll give you, you'll have another child. So Eli was so convinced that he could give a bracha for this woman to have another child. Quite amazing that he had that trust, and understanding that he had such a powerful vision that he knew that he could give her a bracha have another child, I think that's very powerful that he's willing to take that on his shoulders. That oh yeah, I'll give you another child, like it's his, like he can do that. Like, I mean, it's I guess, tzaddik geyser, tzaddik makes decrees and Hashem has to follow. So he felt that that's within his ability. I mean, it is brought in Hasidic writing that a blessing is you don't really give someone a blessing that they don't have, but you sort of draw down that the blessing comes to fruition. In other words, you sort of see that they deserve something, and then you just bring it into actuality. So I guess it must be along those lines that he saw that she has that already there, and he's just giving a bracha that it should become, that it will materialize, so to speak. He saw that she deserved to have more children in heaven. He saw that there's children there, and he's just. But in any event, and then the fact that Eli let go of his desire to punish him and said, okay, you daven for this child, okay, then I'm not gonna punish him. So a lot of questions on this Gemara. Another question that really is even more surprising is, did Eli not know this halacha that if that the slaughtering is allowed to be done by a regular Israelite? I mean, that's a simple law. Anyone that learns Chumash and Rashi knows it nowadays. I mean, it's a regular, it's a very obvious law that that's regular. Anyone really knows it. And Eli's been around. It's not like he's new to things. So it is surprising that he didn't know this halacha. And even more surprising is the fact that, if you have a kohen slaughter, if Eli thought that the kohenim need to do the slaughtering, then there's a big problem here, because the kohenim, they wear big day kahuna, garments that are special to do the service with. Now, when you wear garments of the big day kahuna, there's 4 special garments that they wear. There's a kasoineth, which is like a type of shawl, like a long shirt. And then there's a avnate, which is a belt. And there's the michnasayim, pants. And then there's the mitznefes, the mikbas is the hat. So there's 4 big day kahuna for regular kohen, regular priest. Now the thing is, the problem is that avnate, the belt that the regular kohen wore. There's a question in the Gemara. How was it made? Was it similar to the kohen gadol belt, or was it similar to the kohen gadol on Yom Kippur's belt? In other words, the kohen gadol on Yom Kippur wore linen garments. On the regular day, the kohen gadol wore, not necessarily linen. He wore mixtures, the garments that had different materials, different colored materials, and so on. And so the avnate, the belt of the regular kohen, his question was a question in the Talmud what it had. And the common understanding, the halacha follows the view that the avnate, the belt of a regular kohen, has wool and linen in it. That's the common view. That's the accepted view in halacha. And so the question on this story is that what was Shmuel doing? He was telling them that you don't need a kohen for slaughtering. What he really was saying is that don't use a kohen for slaughtering, because if you use a kohen to slaughter, the kohen is wearing shatnez. Shatnez is when you have a mixture of wool and linen. And if you get a kohen to slaughter So he's doing work that's not needed. He's not needed to do. He shouldn't be wearing the holy garments for the, to do this type of work. So you're getting a kohen to slaughter, and that means he's going to be wearing the avnate, that belt that has shatnez in it. And so you're causing if he's doing the work in the Beis Hamikdash, so he's supposed to wear the avnate. But if he's not needed, then he's really wearing shatnez.
Which is,
and that is an issue because it's a prohibition in the Torah. It's a very serious prohibition, and according to that, Shmuel was not giving a halachic rendering for nothing. He was actually telling them a halacha to save them from a prohibition, and that you're allowed to do before your Rebbe. To save someone from sinning, you're allowed to do in front of your Rebbe, and therefore he was supposed to, because he's making sure that they don't sin with wearing shatnez. So that is a very powerful question here. That not just he's showing off his and giving a verdict. He's making sure they're not sinning, because if they were to shech with the garment, the kohen's garment, they're actually wearing shatnez. Now, the avnate is the only garment that has shatnez on it for regular kohen. The kohen gadol has other garments that have shatnez. The ephod and the choshen. The choshen had wool and linen in it as well, and I think the ephod. And the Gemara explains that those are not really shatnez because they're very hard. But this is the avnate is the actual garment, and this is the issue of shatnez comes up with the avnate. That's where it's an issue of shatnez, and the law is that when they're doing the service, there's no problem. But when they're not doing the service, at least according to some opinions, there is an issue. Because some opinions say it's not a problem for them to wear it when it's not during their service, but the Rambam holds it is an issue, and because it's considered shatnez. It's considered shatnez. Okay, so in order to answer this question, this is a very strong question. There are a number of ways of explaining it. Is everyone following?
Yeah.
Everyone
Yes,
here?
I follow.
Yeah, I thought shatnez isn't permitted to wear. How come cones are wearing shatnez?
So the only reason they're allowed to wear it is because there's an obligation. There are scenarios where the Torah tells you have to do this. For example, when the Levites started to do their service in the Mishkan, the law was that they had to go through a process. They shaved. What do you mean? You're not allowed to shave? How did the Levium shave their whole body? They shave their beard, everything, because there are scenarios where the Torah says you have to do this, even though it transgresses what we normally consider a regular law. Another example would be marrying one, that a man would marry his sister-in-law. Normally a sister-in-law is prohibited, but if the sister-in-law, her husband passed away and they didn't have children, so then that would be a scenario where it's permitted. So here we have a case where you're not allowed to wear shatnez, but a kohen is obligated when he does the service, or a kohen who's wearing the big day kahuna, the garments of the
Priesthood.
Those garments he's supposed to wear. Those garments are okay. So, and the understanding of the Rambam is that's applicable for that would be the understanding is that would be applicable. not, to wearing those garments, when they're in the base of if they're doing something that's not necessary according to the Rambam, then they really should not be wearing that garment, and they're transgressing the law of Shat. So how do you answer that question? So one answer is that this Gemara is following the view that the avnate, the belt of the regular kohen, was not shatnez, and it was similar to the kohen gadol's belt of Yom Kippur, which was only linen and did not have wool on it. That's one way of understanding it. It's not the common. We normally don't like to say a Gemara follows a view that's not the halachic view, but in case in a case where you don't have any other answer, there would be such an answer that this Gemara follows that view. Another answer is that the prohibition of shatnez applies when you're wearing it as a clothing. If you're wearing it to do the service, then it's not a problem, and therefore, if you're doing it to do the service, it's not a problem because you're not wearing it as a form of clothing to keep warm. You're wearing it because this is the obligation. You're obligated to wear this. So in that case, it's similar to a case where you're there's a case brought in the Mishnah, it's brought in the Shulchan Aruch. If you wear shatnez because you're really selling these garments. You're selling them to goyim. You have shatnez garments. The thing is that when you enter this new territory, they make you pay tax on any of your merchandise. So what do you want to? But they don't make you pay tax on anything you're wearing. So you want to put on the garments that are shatnez that you're going to sell to goyim, because the goyim can wear shatnez. The yid can't wear shatnez. So you want to put on these garments of shatnez, and what you're going to do is walk through the customs with these garments on, and they're not going to charge you tax because it's not merchandise. You're wearing it as clothing. So there is an argument in Shulchan Aruch about this, but there is the view of the Ramah. The Ramah says that this is okay, that you're in a maskaven, whatever. It's considered that it's okay, that you're not transgressing the laws of shatnez. So here, according to this, if you wore the kohen gadol, the kohen garments, if you wore them to go to the store in the morning, that is a problem. Because you woke up, you say, let me put on the kohen gadol garments, I'm going to buy something in Walgreens. That's a problem because you're wearing those clothing as clothing. That's shatnez. Then you have a problem. Or you wear that belt. If that belt is shatnez, and that is you're going to the store with it, that would be an issue. However, if you are wearing shatnez in order to save yourself from the tax, the customs, and you're wearing it not for the purpose of clothing. You're wearing it because it's an obligation. So here you're wearing it to do the service because you think you need to you need a kohen to shech. And you think that you need to wear these clothing in order to shech. So you're not wearing it as clothing, you're wearing it as part of the mitzvah of a kohen doing the avodah. Therefore, it's not considered the prohibition of shatnez. Again, it has to be in a way of warming, derech chimum, in a way of the purpose of warming. According to this view, there is such a view, and that would be a way to understand the Gemara, that he wasn't really teaching a halacha that they needed to know in order not to transgress shatnez, because they anyway would not have transgressed the shatnez law. So that's another way of understanding this Gemara.
Rabbi,
yeah.
What if instead of a shatnez belt, this person was wearing a bunch of four-cornered garments that didn't have tzitzis, and he's obligated to have tzitzis on a four-cornered garment, but he's only wearing them to get away from the tax collector. So is he allowed to put on all these four-cornered garments that require tzitzis in such a case? Or I was thinking also, what if it's a not kosher food? They're not going to tax what's in your mouth, but they're taxing what you're bringing. So he puts all this non-kosher food in his mouth in order to go past the tax collector. Can he do that? I don't. Doesn't sound like you can.
So the question is what the wording of the law, and if there's any rabbinic decrees as well. So like putting non-kosher food in your mouth, would seem to be problematic, even though really the law is the prohibition of eating. But the question would be if that, if we're afraid that you might end up swallowing some and whatever. But with regard to tzitzis, does it have the same law that it has to be derech chimum? That's a good question. And would the same, again, with regard to kilayim, with regard to shatnez, I told you there's really an argument in the Shulchan Aruch itself. The Mechaber holds one way, the Ramah brings the other view. So it's not even so clear as that it's a good leniency. But according to the Ramah, it is, there is such a leniency. So the question is, would that same leniency apply? Would that same opinion, you accept that leniency regarding tzitzis, and does that have the same? Would that have the same leniency, the same rules, the same derech chimum? Does it have to be that way? We'd have to look it up and see if they say the same leniency there as well. So good question. We'll have to, that's an interesting question to compare to. Okay, so the other thing that the other question that I asked about, didn't Eli know this halacha? So the Tzlach, one of the commentaries here, explains that we have it all wrong, our understanding, the way we've explained it, that Eli thought you need a kohen, and the Shmuel said, no, you don't need a kohen to slaughter. Eli knew that you didn't need a kohen to slaughter, but there were scenarios which are brought in the Gemara, that you don't need a kohen, but the kohenim would be the ones to do it, because the kohenim are reason they're very careful and meticulous how they do things, and therefore because kohenim they sort of felt that they're going to be doing it better, right, and more timely. So therefore the kohenim made sure that they're the ones who did these things. And the same thing applied here. Eli said, of course, I know you don't need a kohen, but the way he ran the show, kohenim should be the ones to slaughter also, because they're careful in the way they fulfill the laws of, in the Beis Hamikdash, of slaughtering and so on, and to do things right, So he specifically would ask, as sort of like a mitzvah min hamuvchar, to do the mitzvah better. He said you should have a kohen, and the people in the Mishkan at the time, they all went looking for a kohen, and Shmuel realized that this is not appropriate. That we're going to wait around. It's called shihui mitzvah, waiting to do, pushing off a mitzvah. When you have a mitzvah that you are able to do right away, you're not supposed to push it off. I think one of the sources of that is mitzvah shabal yodcha, mitzvah shabal yodcha, a mitzvah that comes to your hand, you shouldn't push it off. Don't make it chametz. Al tachmitu es hamatzos, we translate as hamitzvahs. Don't make literally, it means don't make the matzahs chametz, but it means don't make your mitzvahs chametz. Don't make your mitzvahs, don't push them off that they'll rise and become that, enough time that that the bread would become chametz. Don't, al tachmitu as ha-mitzvahs. So basically, Shmuel was basically saying that in this scenario, we should not, maybe we shouldn't wait. We should rely on the lenient view, because you don't have a kohen. Let's just do the let's just have a Israelite slaughter, because otherwise you're pushing off a mitzvah of slaughtering of the sacrifice. So that's the way the Tzlach explains this Gemara, and according to that, it answers the other question as well, that he wasn't saving them from transgressing a biblical law of shatnez, because they were, of course, according to this explanation, they were not wearing shatnez clothing. When Eli would say, "Let the kohen do this," of course they didn't wear the kohen clothing. He was doing it as a mitzvah min hamuklar, a special mitzvah, a special way of doing the mitzvah. He was doing it that to let them have them, slaughter, because the kohenim are careful and everything that they do. But he knew that they're doing it not as a obligation; they're doing it only as an extra bonus. And because of that, of course, they didn't wear the kohen clothing and the Beis Hamikdash clothing. And because of that, Shmuel was just saying, let's not push it off anymore. Let's just rely on the regular halacha. But he wasn't really giving a halachic rendering. It was more of a advice of let's not push it off. Let's just do it with the regular Israelite because we're wasting time. So according to that, he wasn't saving them from doing a sin. That's the point. He was giving a halachic rendering. He was giving a halachic rendering that you can't push off a mitzvah, but he wasn't saving them from a sin. That's the point. He wasn't saving them from a sin, and the sin of shatnez. And because of that, he wasn't allowed to give this halachic rendering. Now, so let's go over what we've come up with over here. Shmuel is giving this. Yeah.
Rabbi, was the Kohen Gadol also shechting?
The Kohen Gadol could shech, but but for whatever reason, he said, "Let's go find the Kohen."
Maybe he just meant let's bring a shochet. He didn't want to do it in front of the child to kill an animal, maybe.
Yeah, but he says the words "kiru kohen."
Yeah, I'm saying maybe he just didn't want to do it in front of the child because he's going to be his teacher. You shouldn't look at him as a shochet, killing an
Okay,
animal.
that could be. Oh, that's okay. Nice interpretation. That's interesting thought. Sure. Okay.
If I saw that.
My wife would freak out if she saw it. That's what she's telling me.
Are you saying you didn't slaughter any animals when you were dating?
No, I took him to the shochet.
Okay, so
Rabbi, if a 2-year-old can paskin a halacha in front of his rav, like he's going to really worry so much about seeing somebody shecht an animal in front of him?
No, just his teacher shecht an animal,
That it doesn't matter. Shechting is shechting. I mean, it's a violent act, so it really doesn't matter. So I mean, if he's saying, get a Levi, get an Yisrael, get a Kuti to come and do it, whatever, it really doesn't matter to him because he understands what the act is about.
So okay, that's one way of looking at it. I don't know that Ben is wrong. I think
I'm not saying he's wrong, but I'm saying that
I'm saying you can see what he's saying.
All kinds of explanations here, but I mean,
yeah, okay, that's okay. Just thinking, trying to imagine the situation and try to explain why he didn't want to shecht himself. I think it's good to try to figure that out. Just because he knew a lot at the age of 2 doesn't mean he had the physical maturity of being able to emotional maturity of dealing with with blood and so on. It could be a nice cute explanation.
Rabbi.
Yes.
When Eli said that he would be liable for the death because he ruled in front of his teacher, what about the concept that he's not responsible until he's bar mitzvah?
Oh, That's a very good question. So we sort of touched on that. Is he really deserving? He's only 2 years old, you know. So what it seems like, well, but the commentaries discuss that. And one of the things they mention is that's why Eli had asked him, "How do you know this?" Because when he saw that he was so knowledgeable and scholarly, he felt, oh, that means that he is eligible. He is, to be punished because he has reached a level of at least some type of maturity in understanding that, But at the same time, they also explained that he wasn't going to punish him physically. He was going to just let Hashem punish him, that he deserved to be punished, and unless Eli prays for him to live or forgives him, so to speak. So Eli was thinking of not forgiving him, and then ultimately Hashem would do his heavenly punishment. And because Chana then said, for this child I davened for, and this is the one I davened for, and that you blessed me for. So, because of that, Eli forgave him, and that is how the story, that's how the story concludes. That again, it wasn't about Eli physically punishing this child who was underage, but it was more about Hashem punishing him. And Eli felt that he might deserve heavenly punishment because he was so, he was on this level of, this type of scholarly, like a prodigy of, at his young age. And he felt, okay, then I guess he does deserve it. I don't know. I also wonder that, was Eli nervous that this guy, sometimes you have to be like extra nervous when someone is scholarly and they're also, they have an element of sinfulness in them. Like that, you have to be like extra careful from. I wonder if Eli had something along those lines in mind. Like, do we have to be nervous that this might be, person who's not so knowledgeable, how much bad could they do? They're not so dangerous. But this child is like a prodigy. Who knows what he's gonna, and if he is sinful at this age, who knows what will be when he gets even older. This is like a sign that maybe this could be, this child could be dangerous. It's just a thought that comes to my mind, that he was thinking this, that maybe that's why he felt, that this would be advisable to have him punished by the hand of heaven, so we don't have tsaras like we had with, other people who had too much power in their hands, too much knowledge could be dangerous. But it's just a thought, and I'm just sharing it because I just thought I'd share even though I don't have any source for that. Now, what I will say is that there is another point that answers one of our questions, and that is that Eli really, it answers this question of why did Eli go out of his way? Why did he say, go find the kohen? So one of the explanations is like the opposite of what we thought, that he was looking specifically for a kohen that didn't have clothing of a kohen on. So no, it's not that he was going to transgress the laws he wasn't going to transgress the laws of shatnez, because that's specifically why. In other words, why did Eli say go look for a kohen? He was saying look for a kohen that doesn't have the clothing on, because you can't check with the kohen's clothing on. So according to this, it first of all explains why Eli didn't check, and second of all, why they didn't have any kohenim nearby. Of course they had many kohenim, but the kohenim nearby, they all had the clothing on, and he specifically wanted a kohen that didn't have the clothing in order to check, and that's what they had a hard time finding, because the kohen Kohanim that are in the Mishkan, they have their big dekuna. So that's why he specifically wanted, he specifically went out there. So he wasn't going to transgress the laws of shatnez. So that's another answer to our question. Okay, so I guess that concludes today's class. Any last thoughts or questions before we call it a day? Yes, Ezra?
Well, the fact is that that Shmuel lived to the age of 52.
Right.
Correct? So he never made it. He never made it to 60 or 70, and so it's possible that the words of Eli did come into play, even though at the end he may have forgiven him. The fact that he's already said something, has caused in Limala, in the heavenly courts above, something would happen. And that possibly might be the reason why he passed away at the age of 52. That's what I think. But
so the thing is that there's a difference between Misa Bidei Shamayim and Kares. If I'm not mistaken, Kares means you died before 50, and Kares means you died before 60, and Misa Bidei Shamayim means you die before 50. So if that's true, what I'm saying, and he lived till 52, so then, if he deserved Misa Bidei Shamayim, he didn't get it because he lived till 52. So I have to look that up, but if I'm not mistaken, that's what it says. That's Misa Bidei Shamayim. So that would possibly negate what you're saying. But I have to look it up and just double check.
Rabbi, is there a limited time that the Kohen is supposed to serve? Or is he serving all his life?
Kohen, no. The Kohen is limited from 30 to 50. 30
to 50.
Yeah.
So here is Shmuel that he served only to 50. I mean 52, but it's from 2 years.
Shmuel was a Levi.
Shmuel
was a Levi.
Ah, okay.
But Levi also serves until he's, also has a limited time.
Oh, one second. Maybe I'm wrong. 1 second. I'm thinking of the Levium 30 to 50. The truth is, I have to think about a Kohen. Maybe I'm wrong. 1 second. Maybe a Levi serves.
Okay, so he was a Levi, so he served only to age 50, and that's it. He passed away. His mother told him that he will serve all the days of his life. He will serve all the days of his life, which are to age 50.
Yeah, but what his mother meant was not that he would serve as a Levi. He served as a Navi, and he could have served till he was 100 as a Navi, as a prophet. In other words,
I don't know that. I thought she said he will serve under you in the Beit HaMikdash for all of his life.
Okay, all right. So you're saying
maybe there was a limit of 50.
Yeah, but I don't know that he really served so much in the Beit HaMikdash daily. You know what I mean? While he was younger, he was serving Eli. Yeah, Eli passed away. He was traveling around. We know that Shmuel traveled all around. So I don't know if you can say it as literal as you want to, that he served in the Beit HaMikdash, until
50 years.
Until his death. But again, he wasn't really there in the Mishkan all his life. So I don't know if you could translate it literally, but maybe I don't have to look up the verses and so that's homework for you. You want to reread the verses.
I'll try.
Okay, sei gesund, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.